Greetings and welcome to another edition of The Great Goddess. Praise be to Goddess. Praise be to Goddess. Well, here it is, another Wednesday, and today we have for you a very weighty subject, which is death. And I'm not here today to make a big production out of death or to scare people or do anything for Halloween or to try to rile people up or make them feel heavy or sad or anything. I'm going to take a lighthearted approach to death, but it's not going to be all peaches and cream, but it's just taking a level-headed view of the subject of death. And reminders of death today. One form of death is the death of animals for food. And Ocean Robbins wrote me. I enjoy Ocean Robbins. Usually he's talking about fruits and vegetables, but today he was promoting beef. And for no reason at all except that he thinks that there's a more environmentally friendly form of beef that might be okay. And he's supposed to be a health advocate. And he knows beef is one of the most unhealthy foods. And yet here he is promoting it. And saying it's okay to eat as long as you eat less meat. And he's promoting this guy who wrote this article. I guess it's an article, or he called it a study, but it was more like an article telling you what to think. And he always does that. He always writes his stories in a format telling you what to think of something. So I was really mad, and I overreacted, I admit. And I wrote to Ocean Robbins and told him how I felt about it and told him he ruined my day with this. And I know I shouldn't let other people ruin my day. I know I should live my life without getting upset by repercussions from others, because I'm so emotionally volatile and I allow myself to get upset easily and I get all worked up about something. I just felt betrayed by him because he's supposed to be a health promoter and he's supposed to be promoting healthy foods, and here he is promoting beef and saying it's environmentally friendly or environmentally sound as long as it's RA beef, which is basically grass-fed beef, which uses 10 times as much land as regular beef. And all these people were chiming in and saying how great RA beef was. So I wrote to him and told him I didn't want to hear this anymore from him ever again. And if he does write to me about RA beef again or anything else about eating animals, I will drop him. I will unsubscribe from him because I am not putting up with it. I drew the line. That's the last straw. I don't want to hear about it ever again. So, death of animals. What do animals go through in a slaughterhouse? Does anybody know? Does anybody who eats beef on a regular daily basis really know what these animals go through or what they're thinking or feeling? They don't know, and they haven't seen for themselves what goes on in these slaughterhouses, so I doubt it. But it's a reminder of death, and death affects us all. I wrote to Judy the other day, and I said to her that I wanted her to inform her daughters that in the event of her death, I would like to be informed. I would like to know if Judy dies, right? And she could die in an accident suddenly, or she could die of a lingering illness, or she could die in her sleep suddenly. She's up there in years. She's about 75, so sorry, Judy. I didn't mean to tell everyone your age. But, yeah, she's up there in years and she could die. It is possible for her to die suddenly. and she's broken her ankle before, so if she got something like a broken hip, that could do her in. And Judy doesn't have the healthiest diet. She eats meat and all sorts of things and doesn't feel bad about it, so that could do her in. So I told her that I wanted to know whether she died or not. And she said, "This is seriously creeping me out. And if I told my daughters about you and told them what you said, they would think you were a weirdo." And she was just really mean to me, really mean. And it was because she gets so upset when it comes to the subject of death. The subject of death bothers her so much that she got really mean toward me, telling me that her daughters would think I was a weirdo and that I was creeping her out. So that's the way Judy is when something upsets her, she gets mean. So I backed off. I backed off a little bit, but I told her that it's probably a generational difference and also a cultural difference because I'm the grunge generation. I was into grunge music and alternative and in indie music, and that there's a big focus. There's a focus on the subject of death. Death plays an integral role in a lot of that music, and my generation was very affected by the death of Kurt Cobain. We don't know whether he was murdered or whether he committed suicide, but whatever happened, death entered the picture. He died. And we were all strongly affected by the death of Kurt Cobain. And, my generation made us face our own mortality. And we thought about death a lot. I mean, look at one of the banner songs of the year that it wasn't the year that it was not the year that I graduated. It was before I graduated, but one of the songs of the year was "Fade to Black," which is basically a song about death, maybe suicide. I'm not quite sure. It's been too long, but "Fade to Black" was a song about death, and death was a major focus. And then after grunge came goths, who are almost obsessed with death and who wear all black to represent death. So death was a big deal for my generation, but not so for Judy or for her daughters, who she raised to be very, upright and fearful of death, and just like she is, she's fearful of death, and she raised her daughters to be fearful of death just like she is, and to not only fear death but to not talk about it. That's taboo subject for them in their home. And I don't know if that's a Jewish thing. I don't know if the Jews think death is a taboo subject and don't talk about it or fear it, or what they feel about death. I mean, death has played such a huge role in Jewish history. Look at all the pogroms, and look at the Crusades, and look at Hitler and the Nazis. So death has figured strongly into Jewish history. So they can't back away from death. They can't close their eyes to death or pretend that it doesn't happen. But apparently talking about it is still a taboo subject with them. And I don't know if that's necessarily true, or if it's just true of Judy because she had fears in her childhood toward death. She claims she wasn't raised to fear death, and I believe her that she wasn't raised to fear death, but her mother must have feared death because she transmitted that fear to Judy. Judy picked up on that fear and feared death from the time she was a small child, and then she passed that on to her daughter so that her daughters think anyone's a weirdo who talks about death. And, I can't change Judy. She gets so upset easily and gets so uptight. about certain subjects that they're totally off limits, and she's got a lot of topics like that that are off limits for her. One of the topics that's off limits for her is the Bible, because she reveres the Bible. She teaches it for a living, so that's off limits. And we can't discuss death, obviously. That's off limits. And there's lots of times that she's asked me to drop a subject. I can't think of any off the top of my head. But there's lots and lots of times when she said, could we just please drop this subject? Oh, another one is eating meat, soil conservation. All of those things are off limits for Judy to discuss. And I don't know if it's such a healthy mindset to have subjects that are completely off limits to discuss and they're taboo to discuss, because that's how your mind grows, right? That's how you expand your mind and expand your consciousness, is by being open-minded toward new subjects and not shying away from them or fearing them. Fear is the mind killer, just like it says in, just like Muad Dib said, fear is the mind killer. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. It's Dune. The Dune books. But anyway, fear is the little death that kills you every day and eats away at your soul and kills your mind. It rots your mind and makes you slow and stupid and backward. Fear really takes a toll. So, should we fear death? A lot of people fear death. And like Judy said, the reason she fears death, she said so, is because she doesn't really have the faith in her religion that she would like to pretend to have. Even though she teaches it every day for a living, she doesn't really have the faith. She's afraid because she says, like, we don't know for certain what happened. Some of us are sure. Some of us have had near-death experiences and think we know what might happen. But like Judy says, none of us know for sure. And so if we can't prove it, then we're afraid of it. So this fear of death, and let's face it, there's obviously a disconnect between the body and the soul. I mean, my dead cat visited me after she died, and I wasn't hallucinating. I know she visited me, and she visited my mom too, and we both heard the cat jump in the window. So if there's ghosts, that would prove that there's soul outside the body, and both me and my mom heard, and I saw my grandmother's keys jingling right after she died. So she came back to wanting to go on a car ride. And there is life after death. The real question is, what does it all mean for us, and what's beyond when we pass on? Is it full of snakes and sea monsters and guiding a boat through a marsh like the ancient Egyptians believed? Is it like the ancient Egyptians believed, where you have to face monsters and weather all sorts of dangers on the path to the underworld where Osiris rules? Or is it like the Christians say, where heaven opens up and accepts you, welcomes you in? Or if you weren't a Christian, you wind up in hell, where it's blazing hot and there's a furnace and heat and torture for all eternity? What is death really like? Well, the chances are it's not as great as we thought. It's not as scary as we thought. And it's not as punishing as we thought. None of those are probably true. It's probably very much like Earth, only slightly nicer, because there's infinite possibilities out there in the universe. So when we go out into the universe, we're going to face the infinite possibilities. So it's making touch with goddess and with the infinite possibilities. And it shouldn't be scary at all. It's not scary at all. Now, some souls are earthbound and linger on earth a little longer than others, and some of them become ghosts. But obviously, if people see a bright light when they die and they pass on to the light, then it can't be all that bad, because light is good, right? Light is beneficial, and light is appealing, it's attractive. But of course, darkness makes light even more beautiful, and light is equated with good and darkness is equated with bad, but that's not really the case. True light and true darkness, like real light and real darkness in the real world, are neither good nor bad. Those are value judgments that people pass. But yeah, death doesn't have to be all bad. It could be a good thing. It could be a wonderful experience. It could be beneficial to you. And generally, what I believe, based upon exploring my past lives, I do believe that there is reincarnation, that after we're dead, we're born again, unless we ask Goddess to purify our spirits and move on to the next realm. When we're at peace with ourselves, we will ask Goddess to purify our spirits and move on to paradise. Whereas those who do not want to make peace with Goddess at all will be earthbound. And how many people really want to be earthbound, right? How many people want to go back and do it all again? Not very many. So most people will make peace with Goddess and move on to paradise. Now, they have to be able to make peace with Goddess specifically. If they say, where's my Jesus? I want my Jesus. Then they're going to become earthbound again, because they're obsessed with Jesus. And they can't accept Goddess. They think Goddess is a devil. They think Goddess is a curse. They think Goddess is everything that's wrong with this world. They think Goddess is evil. And that the concept of Goddess is evil, and that she's a devil. That's what they believe. Anything other than Jesus. Even music. Even Kurt Cobain. Even rock and roll, all evil, all of the devil. Even, Freemasons are evil, and they worship the devil, and everything is evil. The government is evil, and they're out to get us. And taxes are evil, and crazy people are evil because they're being punished for being bad and with insanity. And you can tell who the chosen ones are because they're rich and powerful and good looking, and all of these things that Christians believe that are totally whack, totally way out there. Those things are going to keep people earthbound, because they're not going to be able to make peace when they meet their Goddess. When they meet their maker and they meet Goddess for the first time, and they're like, why are you female? You're not supposed to be female. You're supposed to be God the Father. I can't accept you. Then they're going to be earthbound again. And that's how they got themselves in trouble in the first place. Let's face it. It's because they couldn't accept Goddess as female. Not specifically a woman, because women are human. But as female, that they couldn't accept her as female. They couldn't accept God as a girl. That they became earthbound in the first place. It was male pride. Male pride and love of proud males that bound both men and women to this earth. And the desire of men to be worshipped, and the desire of women to worship men and to displace Goddess in their lives, made them earthbound. It's so obvious. I mean, everybody worships God the Father, right? At least here in America, everybody worships God the Father. So if they all worship God the Father, or if they all worship a man, or a man god, I mean, even the Hindus have man gods. They even admit that Vishnu was born as a human twice, at least twice, maybe even 12 times he was born as a human. So they do believe that some of their gods, and they believe Shiva was born as human. So they do believe that some of their gods were human. And so they do worship man gods. Now that doesn't mean they exclude goddess from their lives. They don't. And they would be able to accept goddess when they die. But they do worship man gods. And, for Christians, that's all they have. All they have is their man god. So they wouldn't accept goddess at all. So that's a real problem. That's a problem for enlightenment. And it's a problem for passing on and accepting goddess. I think the Hindus will have an easier time of it. But the thing that's required, the thing that's most required is to realize that you can't necessarily go it alone, okay? Once your spirit is corrupted, you can gradually purify it here on earth through many lifetimes and through the influence of other human beings. Or you can ask Goddess, which is more necessary, to purify your spirit for you. But you have to reach that point through your experiences here on earth that you want that. Because if you don't want that, why would you ever ask? And why would you even want it if it were offered to you? If somebody said, do you want your spirit purified so you can live in paradise? You would think most people would say yes, but you'd be surprised. A lot of people would say, I don't accept you. So why would I want my spirit purified by someone I don't accept as my God? And so if they can't accept, then they have to come back. But I really think that once people meet Goddess, that they'll be in awe of her and they'll be able to accept her and be able to accept purification if it's offered to them. They might not know that they're corrupt. A lot of people don't realize that they're corrupt. How can that be? They've done bad things and they're surrounded by bad people who are maybe even 10 or 100 or 1,000 times worse than they are. And there's been people on earth like Hitler, and yet they still think that there's no such thing as human corruption. Now, the Christians do believe in a fall. They believe in a fall from grace. But they believe that was merely a choice. But the kind of corruption I'm talking about is not necessarily a choice, okay? Now, people did make certain choices that led to becoming corrupted. Don't get me wrong. There is a element of choice in there, but they weren't. Once they were corrupted, they couldn't choose to become uncorrupted unless they asked Goddess for help, and they had to be willing to ask Goddess for help. And what Goddess required of us in order to become purified is that we live a life as human. That was her stipulation. I will purify you and you can enter into paradise, but first you have to go through a purification process and you have to live a life as a human on earth. And one of the purification processes, I talk about this in my book, the people go through this purification process before they're even born as human, and then the purification process continues while they're human. And then once they die, they have to ask for the final step. They have to get to the point where they've purified their souls enough and been purified enough that they're willing to ask for help. And they have to realize they need help, that they can't do it alone. Because that's what a human life is for. It's to get people to realize, one, to realize that they need help. Two, to want help. and 3 to get to the point where they're willing to ask for help. That's the whole point of having this human life, is that it changes your will. Whatever your will was before, that it changes your choice. And you'd not believe this. Maybe you wouldn't believe this. But everybody here on earth was a rebel, okay? We were the rebels. Okay, not everybody on earth. There might be a few angels here on earth. And there might be a lot of people here on earth that became corrupted by interacting with corrupt people. You know how kids have a corrupting influence on each other, and even adults have a corrupting influence on each other. Well, the same way with souls. Souls have had a corrupting influence on each other, and maybe some of them were trying to help and became corrupted just by being exposed to corrupt people. But basically, all the people that you know that are bad were all corrupt spirits, and they were all rebels against Goddess. And so there's a lot of rebels here on earth, and it explains why a lot of bad things happen. Despite the purification process we've been through in order to become human, that isn't enough to purify some people. Some people are just corrupt. So what I recommend is that everyone, when you get to paradise and you meet Goddess, ask to be purified so you can stay in paradise. Ask. Just ask. That's all you need to do. Or if it's offered to you, just say yes. That's all you need to do. You don't have to be a rebel anymore. And rebels aren't always good things. Look at the rebels in the Civil War. They were obviously in the wrong enslaving black people, but they did it anyway because they were rebels. And they had a rebel spirit, and it all depended on where you were born, whether you became a reb or not. If you were born in the North, you became part of the Union Army. If you were born in the South, you became a rebel. So people are easily corrupted. They are easily influenced by their parents and by the way that they're raised. We've seen that in human history. We've seen it in action. We've seen evidence of it in Nazi Germany. It really matters where you were born and to whom. How you turn out and what you believe. And some people can rebel against their parents because they have a rebellious spirit, and sometimes that's a good thing because sometimes their parents are bad and they can go the other way and become good. But most of the time people are right there agreeing with their parents, even if they're bad, to the bitter end. So a lot of Christians realize in some way that they're corrupt, and they sing, "Make a clean heart within me, O God, and renew a right spirit within me," and they sing it in this sad, sad tune. Very sad. It's so sad and heartrending. And they believe it's because of the fall, because of Adam and Eve. But it's not. It was their own personal fall. It was their fault. It wasn't their ancestors' fault. It's not something they were just born with. It's in their spirits. That's the problem, is their spirits are corrupt. And they did it themselves. It wasn't somebody else that did it. So they don't have to curse their parents or curse their ancestors or curse Adam and Eve. They don't have to do that because they can just thank themselves for being corrupted. But there is an element of choice. But once a person becomes corrupt, they really can't change without some help, and they have to want help. A lot of people have been changed. Let's face it, people can be purified. All they have to do is get in a situation where they meet someone that changes their lives and makes them want to ask for help. And there's things that humans can do to help purify other humans. There's psychotherapy. That's a big one, psychotherapy. If people are willing to use drugs and psychotherapy to help themselves, all the better. But I mean, drugs don't really help as much for as psychotherapy does, but because it's been proven that psychotherapy is more effective. But I mean, drugs are good if you're hallucinating, but they don't really make you a better person. But if accepting any kind of help if you need it, and to be in a more positive frame of mind because you're not hallucinating all the time is always a bonus. That's always a better thing. But yeah, some people go to prison, and when they go in, they're total rebels. Most of them are former gang members. They're gang bangers, and they don't want to hear from anyone. And then they meet some Christians in prison, and it changes their whole lives. They become more open and willing and wanting to do good and wanting to be reincorporated into society. And some commit murder and they're in prison for life, but they've turned over a new leaf anyway. They've changed because of the influence of religion. Religion is one thing that can change people, and another, psychotherapy, can change people, but usually it's religion that changes people. So if Christianity changes people for the better, I'm all for it. That doesn't change the basic facts of human corruption, but it does make it easier for people who have done wrong to turn over a new leaf and to realize that they're wrong. So anything that makes people realize that they're wrong is positive, but it's obviously negative to deny Goddess. But that will come in time once the person needs evolved to the point where they're ready for Goddess. And it could be a long time before they're ready for Goddess. It takes time to get to the point where we can accept her. And in general, even for those who are hardcore God worshippers, to realize that God has to have a feminine aspect, even if God were not predominantly male, but had a male aspect. God has to have a feminine aspect also, otherwise they couldn't have created this world, because there's evidence of femininity all around us. So God has to have a feminine side, and that has to be accepted. Even by hardcore God the Father worshippers have to accept that Goddess has a feminine side, and that she is a feminine creator. Even they have to accept that there's a feminine side to God. So that's it. Death. Is death really something to fear? I don't think so. Everybody dies, so why be afraid? If it's something you can't change, fear only just robs you of your energy. It drains you, and it's not worth it. So don't live in fear. Be brave. Be as brave as you can be, and face death with equanimity, because it's your passage to the next world. It's your passage to something better. And not everyone is afraid of death. Some people are looking forward to it because they're looking forward to the world beyond, which they should be. They should be looking forward to the world beyond. And they should be looking forward to meeting their Creator. And they should be looking forward to the next passage. So, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid whatever you do, even if you're an atheist. Don't be afraid. Because everyone goes through it, and it doesn't have to be that bad. I'm Sarah Jane Alphawolf, signing off. Have a terrific week. Don't fear death. And don't eat animals if you can possibly avoid it, because they die too.